Hello, everybody. How are we today?
Wonderful.
Yes, love that. My name is Sarah Colley. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator here at the Great Falls Public Library. And I am so excited to once again be here with all of you guys. See lots of familiar faces, mainly everybody in the room, and I appreciate that. So thank you for being here. Today we are doing another part of the Learning with Leigh series that we have going on. This is Leigh. The Learning with Leigh series was established because Leigh does a lot of research and really dives into the background of a lot of different topics and items that she considers exciting. And so here at the library, we like to promote research and literacy. So that's what we're doing. Yeah. Isn't that exciting? The Great Falls Public Library is always here to connect people with resources and knowledge through a whole variety of different ways. So programs like this, and then author talks and everything else that we have is part of how we do that. As always, the restrooms are out the door to the right. There's a water fountain out there as well. And then, given the amount of people, I think I'll also open up the emergency staircase for us so that we don't have to wait for our dinosaur of an elevator. So that's pretty great. Okay, so tonight, as I said, we are having Leigh Larson here as part of our Learning with Leigh programming, and we have a new bio this evening, so listen up. Leigh Larson is a Texan living in Montana. Raised between two worlds, she fell in love with the outdoors and writing through her small town East Texas dad, and got her passion for women's advocacy through her women's healthcare doctorate, nurse practitioner, and lobbyist mother in Fort Worth. She graduated as a presidential scholar and as a Jefferson Scholar from the University of Texas at Austin with a BA in International Relations. She joined the U.S. Air Force Reserve Chaplain Corps candidate program while in seminary at Phillips Theological in Tulsa, but left the faith and ministry for the financially lucrative software engineer world.
It was really hard to be pastor.
7 years later, she wound up finishing her master's in theology and wrote her thesis on concerns for the U.S. military chaplaincy and is currently expanding this thesis into a book. She lives in Great Falls, where she works for herself as a web designer while producing social media content about American history, theology, politics, and her travels. She is a children's book author of 3 books about her dog, Professor Huckleberry, her dog's adventures in national parks. Leigh enjoys traveling across the country and the world, but loves nothing more than being with her dog and loved ones watching a sunset over the highwoods. Please join me in welcoming Leigh.
I'll never get that down. I'm trying to trim it all the time. I'm sorry, so thank you. Howdy folks, my name is Leigh. Thank you for being here for another episode. You can tell you're podcasting. Another information session with Learning with Leigh, where we just look at American history, just different parts of it, kind of get a little closer, and what would it be like if you were a fly on the wall during that time?
Leigh, can you turn on your microphone?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, everybody. Hello. Hello. Oh, hey. Hey, guys. So, today, we're going to be talking about the Declaration and the Constitution. Not so much the documents themselves, but how the public was reacting at the time. How were other politicians, other founding fathers, pastors, the press, really kind of saying more in like the public side of it. And then we'll wrap up with sentiments of the founding fathers through their letters and journals, with their letters to one another, to the press, to other politicians, elected officials, organizations. We'll see if the founding fathers were proud of what they created at the point of their death. All right. So the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution have been our guiding documents since 1776 and 1789 or so. But really, the Declaration of Independence, that and the Constitution are 2 separate documents written 13, 15 years apart, as we'll see. But just want to make that clear, that they were not done on the same day, not done in the same year, that there was time that passed in between those documents, over a decade. And in that time, while we revere our founding fathers and we revere these documents, in fact, the Constitution is the oldest single document, I think, still in existence, a constitution in the world. So the U.S. Constitution is also, it's unique globally. So we revere these documents and these people, but also there was a lot of controversy, and there still is, I mean, as we'll learn. All that to say is that you think America has gone off the rails. It has always been off the rails. Right? I don't know how we're here. Oops, going backwards. Okay, so I said 7 founding fathers during this time, but the phrase founding fathers is actually kind of new. It was crafted in Warren G. Harding's presidency in the late 1910s, early 1920s. So throughout the entire 1800s, they weren't running around calling these people founding fathers. They were just kind of the guys who set it up. In fact, it's really interesting because last year I had the opportunity to go to a road trip in like Appalachia up into DC. And Mount Vernon, when we talk about how we revere history, Mount Vernon, George Washington's home, was completely dilapidated. The sense of like restoring and preserving history, there was a good chunk. So the 1800s were not really a big thing of preserving and talking about this American identity. I say all these 7 founding fathers, like I said, there were so many people that were part of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Some folks that we know, like right off George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. George Washington didn't sign the Declaration of Independence. A lot of people don't know that. There was a lot of John Jay, who was not a president and not someone who authored any of the documents, but was also pivotal in America's founding. So there's a lot of different roles, different names, that it's hard to say what exactly a founding father is. And again, they were also young. They all wore these white powdered wigs. A lot of them were in their 30s and 40s. So when we say founding fathers, it also kind of gives this impression that they are like old, wise elders. And they were just kind of, they were men, just young, middle-aged men. And ultimately, serious clash of culture and creed. Yes, all these colonies were kind of in the same world together, but they were vastly different, religiously, culturally, how they viewed women's rights, Native Americans, slaves, it just varied. So really interesting that all of these folks came together. Also Christianity versus deism was a part. So you had a bunch of men, to put it plain, with a bunch of egos in the room, trying to get all this together. And all of them had a vested interest. All of them were educated. There was differing levels of wealth. George Washington was an extremely wealthy man. He came from the Anglican church tradition. For folks a little unfamiliar, Anglican was the Church of England. It eventually became the Episcopalian Church. What that means for George Washington is he was a very wealthy slave-owning man, aristocratic, did come from that high society. But then you had Thomas Jefferson, who was also slave-owning, but was far more in the backwoods, and didn't like that elitism. So even, yes, they were all a bunch of rich old white guys, but they all had old rich guy fights and dramas and conflicts. So, how it started. So 1776 is the Declaration of Independence. That was the document that we wrote, founding fathers, to the king. And it expressed exactly what we felt it had a list of grievances. It said here, we have agreed that all of these things are government overreach, it's tyranny. It had issues on economic policy, military, but it was very much a document that was like, England, get out. This is us, and this is what we believe in, and we don't believe in your values. So, very quickly, now a Declaration of Independence is just that. It is just declaring that you are going a different direction, fundamentally, with your government, But you need a constitution, a legal framework, particularly with these colonies. They were like free rogue states. Like they were wildly different from one another. So they came together for the Articles of Confederation. And this was our first constitution. And it just was so weak. It didn't have any sort of tax levying, so you couldn't raise a military together. And it was really a league of friendship. Like, yep, we're all together. Like it was like a very loose allyship. Couldn't like do trade. There couldn't be different understandings on taxes amongst one another, and it was just a mess, right? So that's what's going on there loosely, and as that is getting published, they're already like, we got to do something else. This isn't going to be effective. 1783 is when officially England is gone. So we declare independence. 7 years later, England's like, all right, we're gone. England is also going broke. So, and the war in the United States colonies is far away from them. So pick your poison. Some people are like, yeah, U.S. won the war. And then some folks are like, I don't know, England just kind of faded. So few. Then, like I said, they convened. They're like, all right, this Articles of Confederation is not working. Let's convene. We'll call it the Constitution Convention. That was also not perfect and was ratified 2 years later. And that, of course, they were like, wait, the Constitution's not enough. We need a Bill of Rights. We need an explicit list of what the rights of the citizens are. Because right now, this Constitution is pretty good, but it's not specific. And Jefferson's whole thing was individual liberties. Like, that's like one thing. It's like, tyranny for Jefferson. So Jefferson's big on the Bill of Rights. All right, so going back to the Declaration of Independence, who was there and who were the main authors? So we know Thomas Jefferson, we've heard of Benjamin Franklin and John Adams, but who are Roger Sherman and Robert Livingston? Guys, they're our founding fathers. Like, these guys were the old guys in the room. They're the ones that have been working on, and I'll talk about them in the next slide, but it's super interesting to think that, oh my gosh, Thomas Jefferson had a mentor? Like, that's weird. But these were the main goals. Again, Declaration of Independence is just Declaration of Independence, but it's forming exactly what they think is the rights of their new country compared to what they're fleeing. Their big thing, natural rights, that's really coming a lot from John Locke. This is a lot of Enlightenment philosophy, government by consent, right to revolution, equality. But very much also founded on contradictory sentiments, right? We talk about equality. Well, it was mainly only for property white men at the time. So, a lot of things that were, of their time, of their era, that were later built upon in the courts. But this was the heart of it. That the United States was founded on individual liberties, and that if the leadership is not doing a good job, that we have the right to revolt. So, founding fathers. Roger Sherman, like I said, different levels of wealth. He was a Connecticut farmer. He signed all 4 papers. Isn't that wild? We never hear about Roger. And here he is, he's signing everything. And he was super instrumental in making sure that we got the House and Senate and separating those powers. So, thank him. On the other side, and again, the reason why you don't hear these names too much is they were already of elderly age at the time of the Declaration of Independence. So by the time things really started getting going after the 1800s, they had passed. But we have Robert Livingston, super wealthy New York lawyer. And a big reason why we don't hear from him is he went back to New York and did a bunch of big political things for the state of New York. But really big on French diplomacy and trying to get that laissez-faire sort of style of government in the United States. And like I said, George Washington was away at war, so he did not sign the Declaration of Independence. He was leading troops at the time. And John Hancock was the president of the Continental Congress. He did have a very flamboyant personality, so it made sense that not only for his title as president of the Continental Congress, but his personality and his title were fitting for such a large signature. So here are some of the grievances. Like I said, when you list your grievances, you're also making claims of your own beliefs. If you say, I don't like how you treat someone, well, you are also saying that there's some sort of way that someone needs to be treated. So, slavery and religion. Jefferson adds slavery to the list of grievances. He really wrestled with it. We're not going to claim any sort of apology for Thomas Jefferson. He did his sins, but he did put slavery in the original Declaration of Independence draft. Georgia and North and South Carolinas, they come back and they're like, we're not signing that. Absolutely not. Slavery is a core part of our economy, and we'll just leave. Like, we don't have to, like, we'll just do our own thing. And Jefferson was like, oh no, because France and Spain had colonies along the Gulf Coast of the United States at the time. If Georgia and the Carolinas decided not to be a part of the colonies, A, it's a huge part of the early colonial economy, and B, that was their southern stronghold against those two other European threats. So Jefferson removes it. And then everybody else continues to practice slavery, including he did impregnate his enslaved women. So again, everything is starting off very contradictory. We have men talking about liberty while doing this, and we're also seeing how grievances around religious tyranny did not extend to the indigenous folks. There was an entire genocide on the basis of religion going on at this time. And there were, we do see in the correspondence that there were conversations about what to do with women, and they also kicked that one down the road. So, just interesting to see how things were discussed or noted at the time, and then we're just like, no, not a priority. So, nation building is some messy work. So here's the Constitution. This is 1787. They meet in Philadelphia. Rhode Island didn't come. They're talking about how bad the Articles of Confederation are. They're like, guys, we can't do anything with this. All this is doing is saying that we're all in the same group chat together, but are we contributing money to the party? Are we raising and security? What's going on? So this is where they come together. They're like, we need a strong central government. We'll split it into these three different branches, and we'll just start winging this, really. They had the 3/5 compromise, the Connecticut compromise, and all of this is eventually signed in 1787 and ratified 2 years later. The big thing is we the people. It's very, very, very important that we the people, not we the Christian people, not we the bankers or the Chevron exec team, but we the people ruled everything. Like that, the power came to the people. They were very concerned of it being a pure democracy, because democracy can also very easily be taken over by mob rule, which is why we have elected officials and have things broken up a little bit more than just like everyone votes what they want and we roll with it. So, during this time, we talked about how the Constitution created a strong central government. That was one of Thomas Jefferson's fears. He was just, like I said, like, tyranny. He gets quoted by folks on both sides of the political aisle for a lot of his sentiments. He was very much, Jefferson was, like I said, against big government of any kind, or any tyranny. So big religion, or big bank, or you could go the other way and say anything socialized. I mean, he was just like, nope, every man for himself. That's not how Hamilton thought. He was like, no, we have to have some sort of levy of taxes, we have to raise a military. Eventually we're going to need to start talking about interstate commerce and transportation. Like, if we're really going to be a unified country, we have to act like it and have some sort of central organizing. So, two different schools of thought, and they hash it out. Really more Madison does. Madison was Jefferson's protege. And Madison and Hamilton duke this out. There's also different influences. There's this British ideology, and then you've got the French laissez-faire. The government's not very involved with the way the economy works. Meanwhile, the British approaches the economy with a lot more control, government regulation on the economy. So you have two different schools of thought going on here. It's like, meanwhile, newspapers, letters, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, it should be understood, that for as great and as revered as they were, so many people were disappointed with it. People who wrote it, because they thought that they were having to make so many compromises to get to that point that the things that they wanted were gone. But then so they're like, nope, I had to take out my special thing, and because of that, it's all going to heck, So everybody was just like, newspapers, letters, church response. Oh my gosh, because separation of church and a secular government had never been done before, people were terrified. Truly, they were like, we are going to hell. Thomas Jefferson died, he's an infidel. Oh my gosh. It was all over the place. So, you also had people that were just, it was vicious with rumors and lying, just as much as there is TikTok and McCarthyism. Those things, like, people in politics have always been viciously nasty, and so it was nasty at the time. There were threats of whole colonies being like, no, then we're going to pull out. Oh, if it keeps going like this. Same thing we hear now. So, as I said, George Washington, a wealthy dude. He's also super tall. That was just like a thing throughout all of this. Was just like this tall, quiet, rich dude just looming in the corner. We love him. Gotta acknowledge it. But he was a Virginia farming too, so he loved hosting parties. So he goes. Like I said, it's not there for the Declaration of Independence, but he is the first president, serves a couple of terms. Guys, the whole time, homeboy tries to retire 3 times. When he's done with his military career, he saw a lot of gruesome stuff. So he's ready to go home. And then they're like, no, come back and be the chief against the British. And he's like, okay, fine. And they're like, oh, you're such a good leader. Please stay as president. And he's like, oh my God, I just want to go home. So makes it to March. And finally, they let him go home. And he parties and then dies. So we don't have time. We don't have the time on George Washington.
It's a hell of a part.
But like any commander of the military, he was so concerned with division. His whole thing was uniformity. We just need everyone to stay on track. The minute we divide, we've lost the plot. So he is absolutely against political parties. He's scared that that is going to fracture, and all the work that he just did and all the bloodshed he's seen is going to be in vain. So he is just like, stop it. Like, y'all are just going to split, and propaganda is going to come out, and what are we doing? So back to George Washington. He's convinced America will fall to division and political parties. Hamilton, never a president, but he was a soldier, and he served under Washington. He also was our Treasury Secretary under Washington. He and Washington are friends, buddies. And then he started the first political party, which is what it said George Washington. He was like, come on, my protege. That was like the one thing I said not to do. And so Hamilton's like, no, I have to. Like, I'm an economist, you're a military, let me do my thing. So that's what Hamilton does. He goes on very big on having a big central government. And he was just aggressive. He was belligerent. He had no problem being confrontational or insulting. And he made a lot of people laugh. But because of that, we have all of this, the central bank, military, and also just industries that he brought in. Like I said, he made a lot of people mad, eventually made Aaron Burr mad, who took him out by gunshot in a duel. How cool. I'm not saying to bring back duels, but I don't know. Yeah, so 1802. So he doesn't see a lot, right? He gets the Constitution passed, and then he sees the next 10 years, but he dies at the turn of the century. Then we have John Adams. John Adams was our third president. Funny enough, he actually considered Unitarian ministry before going into law. He had sort of like a neurotic personality to him. He was just always, he really, really meant, like his writings are super influential. But he was just kind of a nervous dude, and I was really worried that these government documents were not strict enough on morality of human people, right? He thinks he's minister first, and then he goes into law, but he's scared that the original documents we had, he doesn't think that there should be any sort of forced religion, but he's just, because it's so secular, he's like, no, I'm scared. Like, I don't think the people are good enough without some sort of, centralized document or doctrine, to uphold democracy. And that's, no one trusts a king, but can we also trust the people? And so those were his questions. And he thought that people were selfish, that they would always vote in self-interest instead of the common good. So he was really good friends with Thomas Jefferson. Then there was some election mess, and then they were friends again. Thomas Jefferson apparently wrote John Adams a nice note, and John Adams' wife died, Abigail Adams, and that was very meaningful. So they reconnected after the death of Abigail Adams and had a civil friendship after a very vicious fight in the 1800s. John Adams is also interesting because he was president during the War of 1812, and he saw how good war is for patriotism. And he is very big, so he sees, he's like, because before then it was the American Revolution. They didn't have any other sort of battles to see how people could rally around the flag. So John Adams sees like this War of 1812, he's like, wow, this is the first time we've actually called ourselves Americans, and we've come together, and we've fought. So John Adams really has a lot of writing about how good war is for patriotism that gets lifted and used for nefarious circumstances. But and even though he was rivals, he dies on the same day of Thomas Jefferson, July 4th. In fact, Adams outlives him and says, "Jefferson lives." No, Jefferson outlives him, and Adams says, "Who lives?" and he dies. So really. Just a funny, they just hated and loved each other. They were just bound. It's like there's the hate for one another, but they're bound by this whole history, this shared trauma of nation building. So Thomas Jefferson, again, he was really nervous. He died 50 years after the Declaration of Independence, so he's seen half a century. What is he thinking towards the end? He is super nervous that Hamilton just ruined everything, and the government's way too big, and now the states should be broken up into smaller units. So he's big into counties and wards. He's like, we just need to keep breaking everything down to the smallest unit. He's not a fan of the Supreme Court. He thought that was too much central power of judicial power. He wrote a lot about slavery. Like I said, a very complicated man, because in some letters he's writing to Madison like, slavery is by far the worst thing imaginable. We need to free these people. This is not liberty. And on the other hand, he's like, yes, but if we, remove their handcuffs, they'll reach for daggers and they'll kill us all in retribution. So what do we do? So there's a lot of conversation about taking all these slaves and sending them down, enslaved folk and sending them down to like Cuba, Haiti. They're not even from there, right? So lot of correspondence for Thomas Jefferson freaking out about slavery. He thinks that's ultimately going to be the end of the United States, a war on slavery, which 1826, one far off, right? A few decades later, we do go to war over slavery. He thought that war was going to end the United States. Also, just circling back, they called him an infidel. I mean, the Antichrist, I mean, everything. Thomas Jefferson was the worst thing that could have happened to the Christian church for a lot of people. He was an enemy of Christianity, they called him in the press. That's not true. He had donated to Christian organizations and occasionally went to church, had his own Bible that he modified. He wasn't a big fan of Jesus' miracles. He thought Jesus was cool on like the love your neighbor thing, but thought like miracles were a little woo-woo. Jefferson. He was like, oh yeah, the whole 5,000 people thing is a little weird for Jefferson. So, whatever. So that's Jefferson. He also was super skeptical of clergy, which did not help his case. Like, he's out here like, no, I think Jesus is fine, but I just think religion and clergy are, can be very powerful and influential, and I'm skeptical of them. And he did nothing to help himself, right? He's just over here mouthing off about religion and religious leaders.
Well, I mean, that would be part of his being afraid of big organizations, right? Like,
Yeah.
Clergy is a big organization. It doesn't like,
And, thought that they could be misleading or manipulate. Everybody was a threat to Thomas Jefferson. And God love him, thank you. We have a lot of liberties for that, but if it hadn't been for someone like Hamilton to be like, okay, we have to trust each other at some level, right? And then Monroe. So I typically don't talk, I have Madison, but for Monroe, he was a soldier. What's interesting about him specifically is that no one really was feeling good about America until probably the post-war of 1812. It was just kind of a loosely formed country that escaped Britain. And so 1812 kind of gave them that time to prove who they were. And so when Monroe gets in, and he's like, cool, let's do the Louisiana Purchase and the Monroe Doctrine, let's be expansionist, imperialist, and like everyone's like, yeah. There's also heavy influence on Christian church missionary work during the 1800s. Like this is really, we start seeing in the 1800s, folks really seeing like, wow, America's like, we're gonna be cool, we're gonna be the good guys and everything. So era of good feelings. Also did the Missouri Compromise. So still navigating slavery at this point, and then he's gone, he dies. So it's not really like James Monroe seems kind of boring otherwise, but it's really important to understand that things are still a little pessimistic about the country. And then Monroe and then finally Madison. Madison's story is really cool because of any of the founding fathers, he was one of the youngest, which means he was one of the last to die, but he was also so optimistic because he was one of the last to die. He got to see America go through some pretty significant ordeals and survive it. And for that, he was like, I think we're going to be okay. One of the things, excuse me, he argued, he went to court over someone about the Constitution that he wrote. He's the father of the Constitution. Someone takes him to court and he loses it. He wrote the document and now he lost it. And he was all mad about it. And at first he was like, no, that's not the intention. And that was when he realized, like, no, because the people have the opportunity to interpret it for themselves. He also saw the abolition of slave trade. He, like Jefferson, was very much against slavery, but didn't really know what to do with it since it was their form of economic labor. For them to give up slavery would also mean they'd lose power, and then they wouldn't be at the seat to write these documents, or at the table to write these documents. So there was so much overlapping thing going on. So he sees the abolition of the slave trade. He's feeling like, cool, we can do this. He also sees Andrew Jackson's populist presidency. He was really worried. Madison and Jefferson were worried about these elitists coming in and using their credentials at top universities or their money or their bank accounts to come in and steamroll the people. So he sees Jackson's presidency as like, aha, the people still have the power. And then railroads. He sees railroads and he sees the advancements in technology. He's like, this is cool. Like, I think we're going to be able to do something, and look at how this is affecting America. But yeah, at the end of his life, he was like, the American people are going to be okay. They'll be able to figure it out, and that's really cool because the others were not happy. They were like, nope, it's gonna divide, the Civil War is gonna take us, people aren't good. And Madison was like, all right, it's gonna be all right, we're gonna figure it out. It's gonna look messy, right? We can go through every one of those. Jackson's problematic. We're not putting Andrew Jackson on a pedestal. But the point being is like that America keeps unfolding, whatever that looks like. And so there's a lot to be said for James Madison. So, yeah, those 15 years were super messy, very turbulent, very concerning. None of the founding fathers really agreed on anything, as you saw. John Adams and Jefferson were best friends, and then they weren't, and then they became friends again. You saw how Hamilton was Washington's right-hand man until he wasn't. So, like, it really was like every man for himself, and may the best idea win. And here we are. So, we've got ego, we've got privilege, clashing, breeds clashing, but the United States was built on Protestant enlightened values and philosophies. But it was also such a mix of so many other different ideologies compromising and coming together. Every single person in the Continental Congress had to compromise significantly in order to make the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution work. And that's it. It's just constant compromise and sacrifice, and very little being happy and pleased with what politics is, right? It almost feels like public transportation. Like you're not going to get exactly where you need to go. Just get on the bus and get close enough. So, let me throw my sources. Nope, sorry. Super small, sorry. But that's about it. The one book that I really want to point to is The Spheres of a Setting Sun by Dennis Rasmussen. That's got it goes by a founding father and their correspondence to the end of their life. So that's a really cool, just to get to know each one a little bit more. But other than that, I'm done. Do you all have any questions?
I can add another source to your list there, but you should read Miracle at Philadelphia. That's a very good book. If you want lots of details of how it was all written up.
Yeah.
You said Miracle what?
At Philadelphia.
Okay, Philadelphia, thank you.
Also, the Atlantic put out that new edition about this 250th anniversary. That's a good source to read also. It's got different stories in it, but it's pretty comprehensive of what was going on at that particular time.
Thank you. No, and it's really important because like, I feel there's just so much jarring information, and TikTok doesn't help, and it feels like America is chaotic, and it is, and also it kind of always has been. is what I'm trying to say.
I do have a question about when you said, we the people. No. All men are created. What do you think they were thinking the word men meant? I know you referenced women were sort of excluded, but do they really mean that women were excluded, or was the definition of men inclusive of everybody? In other words, a human being.
Yeah, and just like used as, yes, I mean, it would have assumed to be exclusive to women just because that was at the time, but also that was something that people used for the women's rights movement, was that the word man could be all-encompassing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in that,
I didn't know if they could conceive of female political leadership at that time.
yeah, and in that setting, they didn't necessarily just mean men; they meant men with landed rights, because they only gave people with land the right to vote at the time. So I don't believe they meant it as even as all men. It was really just people with money and land and requirements for the future.
Yeah, so we got a document that everyone had to compromise on, that nobody was happy with even after writing it. That was written somewhere around 250 years ago. Why do people hold it in such high regard and will not change it, will stand by it? Specifically, I'm thinking of the Second Amendment, but any of them, it's hell to get an amendment added or abolished or anything like that. Why is it still held so prominent if it was a document that nobody could agree on 250 years ago anyway?
Yeah, no, it really, because it's so precarious anyway, that if you break it, it'll shatter.
Right.
And that's what folks are doing. They're having a state constitution of states, convention of states, where they're looking to amend the Constitution. That's a real thing that's happening. So for different reasons. Some people don't want to touch the Constitution. It is the shortest Constitution in the world. It's the oldest Constitution in the world. And many people are upset or feel that it needs to be more explicit. Things need to be very specified. Otherwise, you get the 2A debates. And things start like that. Or freedom of speech. Or, and so some people would like to see it more specified. And then you go all the way to the other side where like some of these countries in Europe have just redone their constitutions and are thousands of pages long, right? Because it's been so clear and well laid out. And so that is one of the benefits of the Constitution is its simplicity that we can, otherwise once you start tinkering with it, it's going to get ugly because you're going to have to specify some ideologies and
We'll be back where we were
systems.
250 years ago with everyone disagreeing. And
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with the Constitution. But yeah, it's a pretty incredible document in its simplicity. So, but yeah, thank you for hanging out. Oh, yes, sir. Yes.
Good. I've had the fun of reading a book called The Rediscovery of America by Ned Blackhawk, who's a Native American. He's a historian at Yale University, and he pointed out that one of the causes of the Revolutionary War was that the Revolutionary War was preceded by the French and Indian War, and the French in Canada were better than the British in making alliances with a lot of the Indians, but the British competed and also tried to make alliance with the tribes. And the tribes were genuine military forces, and they were dominant in many regions that are today, like still in the northeastern part of the United States. They were dominant. And one of the causes of the Revolutionary War was that the British, because of those alliances they struck during the French and Indian War, had loyalty to the treaties that they themselves had negotiated with these various tribes. And they would not let the European settlers do homesteading in the Indian territory per the treaties. And that pissed a lot of people off. And so that was another one of the causes of the Revolutionary War.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. No, that's a great point. Yeah, and you especially look at like we talked about tyranny from religion, but the Native Americans were not able to freely practice their religion until 1876 or something. So 200 years after this. So again, things built on conflict. Yeah, there's. I love talking about history because there's always one more cause that we haven't thought of. Right? Someone the other day on my TikTok, I was talking about women's contributions to the United States in World War II, and then someone was like, "Have you looked into wartime Girl Scouts?" I was like, "That's a phrase." And so I did. It's just there's so many causes and people who get involved and things like that. So thank you for that. Anybody else? Yes.
Could I ask if you're going to be touching on the Federalist Papers at any point in time?
Yeah, we could do a deeper dive. For
Yeah,
sure.
I
There
think
you
that
go.
would
Now I'm
be good
getting
to
impressed. Thank
understand.
you. This whole time I was like, I hope this was good. Yes. For sure, those are important. Really, we should probably do a proper Declaration and Constitution and Bill of Rights and talk, Federalist Papers talk.
Well, it is America 250, so we can do
Oh,
it.
yeah, we're gonna do it. Cool, all right. Yay.
Thank you, Leigh, and thank you everybody for joining us.